My name is Brooke Anderson, and at 34 years old, I never expected my own parents to try stealing my $2 million inheritance at their anniversary party. But they definitely didn't expect my 16-year-old daughter, Madison, to have been secretly recording everything for months. What she revealed that night didn't just save our future, it destroyed theirs forever. This story involves family betrayal, forged documents, FBI arrests, and a teenage girl who outsmarted some of the most powerful people in New England. It's a story about manipulation, money, and the courage it takes to stand up to your own family when they're wrong. If you're watching this, please hit that like button and subscribe. I need all the support I can get sharing this story. And drop your location in the comments below, because what happened to my family could happen to anyone, anywhere. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why I'm sharing every single detail. Before we dive in, let me warn you, this gets dark. We're talking about parents who are willing to have their own daughter declared mentally incompetent to steal her inheritance. We're talking about forged signatures, fake wills, and a conspiracy that went deeper than I ever imagined. But it's also a story about hope, about a teenager who refused to stay silent, and about justice finally being served. So grab a coffee, settle in, because this is going to take a while to tell properly. To understand how this nightmare began, you need to understand the Wallace family dynamics. My father, Richard Wallace, built his real estate empire from nothing. Starting with a single property in the 1980s, he grew Wallace Enterprises into a multi-million-dollar development company that shaped half of New England's luxury housing market. My mother, Dinah Wallace, came from old money, the kind of New England aristocracy that traces their lineage back to the Mayflower. She brought social connections and respectability to my father's new wealth. Together, they created what appeared to be the perfect power couple. Growing up in their world meant constant pressure to maintain appearances. Every achievement was measured against family reputation. Every mistake was a potential embarrassment to the Wallace name. Love was conditional, approval was earned, and disappointments were never forgotten. I have one sibling, my brother Brian, who lives in California and has spent most of his adult life maintaining careful distance from our parents' drama. Brian learned early that the safest strategy was compliance and avoidance. He'd nod along with whatever Dad wanted, then disappear back to his life across the country. The family dynamic was clear. Dad was the undisputed authority. Mom was his enforcer. Brian was the absent son who caused no trouble, and I was the problematic daughter who asked too many questions. When I married Nathan Pearson 10 years ago, my parents were thrilled. Nathan came from the right family, had the right education, and most importantly, he understood how to play the game. He charmed my father with business talk, complimented my mother's social events, and never challenged their authority. For a decade, I thought we had achieved the perfect family harmony my parents always demanded. Nathan and I lived in a beautiful colonial home, attended the right social events, and produced 2 grandchildren who could carry on the Wallace legacy. But perfection built on lies never lasts. The cracks in my marriage began appearing about 3 years ago, though I was too invested in maintaining appearances to acknowledge them. Nathan started working longer hours, became increasingly critical of my career aspirations, and grew distant from family activities that didn't serve his professional networking. I was working part-time at the Riverside Art Gallery, a position I loved but that Nathan dismissed as playing with paintings. I also did freelance graphic design work, trying to build something of my own while managing household responsibilities and raising 2 children. Nathan's controlling behavior escalated. Gradually, he criticized my spending on art supplies, questioned my friendships with other artists, and made subtle comments about my priorities whenever I attended gallery events. Brooke's little hobby, he'd say to friends, with a smile that didn't reach. His eyes. The affair revelation came in the most cliché way possible. I found text messages on his phone while looking for our son's school contact information. Months of explicit conversations with Kayla Morrison, his 25-year-old assistant. Not just physical affair, emotional intimacy, future plans, discussions about when I'm finally free from family obligations. What devastated me wasn't just the betrayal, it was the timeline. The affair had been going on for over a year, overlapping with family vacations, anniversary dinners, and nights when he'd held me while I worried about our marriage. When I confronted Nathan, his response was calculated and cold. "Brooke, we both know this marriage has been over for years. We're just going through the motions for the kids and your parents." The divorce proceedings were brutal. Nathan hired the most aggressive attorney in the state, coincidentally, a man who played golf with my father every weekend. Suddenly, my part-time work was characterized as inability to maintain stable employment. My artistic pursuits became frivolous spending that jeopardized family finances. My close relationship with the children was reframed as emotional dependency that could harm their development. I lost the house, most of our savings, and found myself moving into a modest 3-bedroom apartment with Madison and Ethan. The custody arrangement gave Nathan generous visitation rights and positioned him as the stable parent who could provide better opportunities for the children's future. Throughout this nightmare, my parents' response seemed supportive. They called more frequently, invited, used for Sunday dinners, and even helped with some expenses. I was grateful, believing they had finally chosen their daughter over social appearances. I was so wrong. Madison had always been perceptive, but the divorce seemed to sharpen her observational skills to an almost uncomfortable degree. While I was struggling to rebuild our lives and maintain some stability for the children, Madison was watching everyone with the intensity of a detective. "Mom, have you noticed how Grandpa talks to Nathan?" she asked one evening after a particularly tense Sunday dinner. They have these private conversations in the study, and when I walk by, they stop talking and smile at me like I'm 5 years old. I dismissed her concerns, desperate to believe my parents were finally supporting me. "They're probably just discussing business, honey. Grandpa has always liked Nathan's financial sense." But Madison wasn't satisfied with easy explanations. She started paying attention to details I was too emotionally exhausted to notice. Like how my parents would exchange meaningful looks when I mentioned struggles with rent or utilities. How they'd suddenly change the subject when I talked about long-term plans for the children's education. How they praised Nathan's stability and business acumen in front of Ethan while barely acknowledging my efforts to rebuild our lives. "They're conditioning Ethan," Madison told me one night, using language that seemed too mature for a 15-year-old. "Every time we visit, they tell him stories about successful Wallace men, about the importance of family business, about how someday he'll need to make important decisions for the family." I thought she was being dramatic, but Madison had inherited my father's attention to detail and my mother's social intelligence. She was reading dynamics I couldn't see because I was too close to the pain. The turning point came during a family barbecue last spring. Madison needed to use the bathroom and accidentally walked into my father's study, where he was having an intense phone conversation. She heard him say, "The custody modification should be straightforward once we establish the financial instability." Pattern: Nathan's documentation is thorough. That night, Madison did something that would change everything. She reached out to Aunt Samantha on social media. Samantha Wallace Chun had been my father's youngest sister, effectively banished from the family 15 years ago after questioning the handling of our grandparents' estate. The official family story was that Samantha was unstable, money-hungry, and had made false accusations against Dad to cover her own financial irresponsibility. Madison found Samantha on Instagram and sent a simple message. "Hi, Aunt Samantha, I'm Madison, Brooke's daughter. I think Grandpa is doing to Mom what he did to you." Samantha's response to Madison opened a window into family history I'd never fully understood. Through a series of late-night phone calls and carefully shared documents, Samantha revealed the pattern of manipulation that had destroyed her relationship with our family. "Your grandfather is brilliant at financial manipulation," Samantha explained to Madison during one of their secret conversations. "He identifies family members who might challenge his control, then systematically isolates them while building cases for their instability or poor judgment." Samantha's story was eerily similar to what was happening to me. After our grandparents died, She had questioned some irregularities in the estate distribution. Properties that were supposed to be divided equally among the siblings had somehow ended up entirely under Dad's control. Trust funds that should have benefited all grandchildren were restructured to benefit only those who demonstrated family loyalty. When Samantha pressed for explanations, Dad began a campaign to discredit her. He shared concerns about her marriage to a calligrapher instead of a businessman. He questioned her financial decisions, like choosing to live in a modest home instead of leveraging family wealth for a mansion. He suggested her questions about the estate came from financial desperation rather than legitimate concerns. The final blow came at a family Christmas gathering, where Dad announced changes to various trusts and property holdings that had already been legally executed. Samantha found herself cut out of inheritances she'd never known were being redistributed, with the family's lawyers explaining that her pattern of financial irresponsibility and family disloyalty had necessitated protective measures. The most insidious part, Samantha told Madison, was how he turned everyone against me gradually. By the time I realized what was happening, I was completely isolated. Your grandmother, your Uncle Brian, even your mother, they all believed I was the problem. Madison absorbed these revelations with the seriousness of someone twice her age. She began documenting every interaction with her grandparents, noting patterns in their conversations, taking photos of documents she glimpsed in Dad's study, and most importantly, recording conversations whenever possible. I won't let them do to you and Mom what they did to Aunt Samantha, Madison told her during one of their secret phone calls. But I need evidence. Real evidence that proves what they're planning. What Madison accomplished over the next several months was nothing short of remarkable for a teenager. She turned herself into a one-person intelligence operation, gathering evidence with the patience and thoroughness of a professional investigator. Her first breakthrough came during a family dinner when she volunteered to help clear dishes, giving her access to the kitchen where she could overhear conversations from Dad's study. She heard Nathan and Dad discussing asset protection strategies and custody modification timelines. Madison started carrying her phone everywhere during family visits, with voice recording apps ready to activate. She developed techniques for positioning herself near important conversations, volunteering to help with serving, claiming to need quiet spaces for homework, even hiding in bathrooms adjacent to Dad's study. The most damaging evidence came from Dad's home office. During one visit, Madison asked to use the office for studying, knowing Dad was playing golf. What she found there was a treasure trove of documents that revealed the full scope of the conspiracy against me. There were multiple versions of legal documents, including what appeared to be practice runs for custody modifications that painted me as financially irresponsible and emotionally unstable. There were property transfer documents that would move my childhood home and other inherited assets to Nathan's name for proper management and maintenance. Most shocking were the psychological evaluation reports. Dad had apparently consulted with mental health professionals about the process for having someone declared incompetent to manage their own affairs. The notes in the margins were in his handwriting: Brooke's emotional volatility since divorce, pattern of poor financial decisions, children's stability requires intervention. Madison photographed everything, but she knew photos could be dismissed as fake. She needed audio evidence of the conspiracy in action. Her opportunity came during my parents' 39th anniversary dinner, a smaller family gathering where Nathan was invited as a close family friend. Madison excused herself to use the bathroom, but instead positioned herself outside Dad's study, where Nathan and Dad were having what they thought was a private conversation. The recording she captured that night was devastating. Nathan and Dad discussing the timeline for transferring property, the strategy for documenting my instability, and most chilling, their plan to use the 40th anniversary party as the public announcement of changes that would already be legally finalized. Brooke will be too shocked to react appropriately in front of all those people. Dad's voice came through clearly on Madison's recording. By the time she understands what's happening, everything will be done. Nathan will have custody, the property will be protected, and we can present it as family members stepping up to help during her difficult time. Armed with months of evidence, Madison faced a dilemma. She knew she had to tell me what she discovered, but she also knew my tendency to try to handle family conflicts diplomatically. She was afraid I'd confront my parents privately, giving them opportunity to destroy evidence and accelerate their timeline. Madison made a decision that showed wisdom beyond her years. She contacted Samantha and shared everything she discovered. Samantha immediately connected Madison with her attorney, who confirmed that the evidence showed clear fraud and conspiracy. "This is enough to stop them," the attorney told Madison during a secret phone call. "But we need to be strategic about how we reveal it. If they know you have this evidence, they'll find ways to discredit it or claim it was obtained illegally." Together, they developed a plan. Samantha would attend the anniversary party as a surprise guest, bringing the attorney and potentially law enforcement. Madison would continue gathering evidence right up until the party, especially any final conversations about implementing their plan. Meanwhile, I was completely oblivious, focused on helping my parents create the perfect anniversary celebration. I spent weeks coordinating with caterers, creating photo displays, and even writing a speech about their enduring love and family values. The irony is painful now. I was literally helping them stage the event, where they planned to publicly humiliate and financially destroy me. Madison watched my preparations with a mixture of admiration and heartbreak. "Mom works so hard to make everyone else happy," she confided to Samantha. "Even when they're planning to betray her, she's trying to give them the perfect party." 3 days before the anniversary party, Madison captured the final piece of evidence she needed. Nathan came to the house to pick up Ethan for a weekend visit, and she overheard him on the phone in our driveway, apparently talking to Dad. "Everything's ready for Saturday." Nathan's voice came through clearly on Madison's recording. "The custody papers are filed, the property transfers are prepared, and Brooke has no idea. After Richard makes the announcement, I'll present it as family members stepping up to help during her crisis. She'd be too embarrassed to make a scene in front of all those people." That night, Madison finally told me everything. When Madison sat me down that Thursday night, 2 days before the anniversary party, and began explaining what she discovered, my first reaction was disbelief. Not because I didn't trust Madison, but because the scope of the betrayal was so enormous that my mind couldn't process it. "Mom, I need you to listen to everything before you react," Madison said, her voice steady but her hands shaking as she held her phone. "I have recordings, photos, and documents that prove Grandpa and Nathan are planning to steal your inheritance and take custody of Ethan." She played the recordings chronologically, starting with the earliest conversation she'd captured and building to the most recent. With each piece of evidence, I felt my world shifting. The parents I'd spent my life trying to please. The ex-husband I tried to co-parent with civilly. The family I believed was finally supporting me. All of it was a lie. The most devastating moment was hearing my father's voice dismissing me as too emotional and independent, and my mother agreeing that Nathan was the son we always wanted. Decades of feeling like I never quite measured up suddenly made sense. I wasn't supposed to measure up. I was supposed to be manageable. "They've been planning this since the divorce started," Madison explained, showing me photographs of documents from Dad's office. "Look at the dates on these papers. They were preparing custody modifications before you even filed for divorce." The fake will was the most shocking discovery. Dad had apparently forged my grandmother's signature on a document that would redirect my inheritance to a trust controlled by him, with Nathan as the designated beneficiary for the welfare of Wallace grandchildren. "Madison, how did you even think to look for this stuff?" I asked, amazed by her thoroughness. "Because Aunt Samantha warned me," she replied. She said Grandpa uses family celebrations to make announcements about decisions that are already final. She said he did the same thing to her at Christmas 15. Years ago. That night, I called Samantha for the first time in over a decade. Our conversation lasted until dawn, as she walked me through the parallels between her experience and what was happening to me. "The anniversary party is the perfect setup," Samantha explained. Richard will present the changes as family members stepping up to help you during a difficult time. If you object, you'll look ungrateful and unstable in front of 200 guests. If you don't object, your silence will be taken as acceptance. So what do we do? I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation. We turn their own strategy against them, Samantha replied. They want to use a public family event to announce their betrayal. Fine, we'll use the same event to expose it. The morning of the anniversary party, I woke up with a strange mixture of dread and determination. Madison and I had spent the previous day reviewing our plan with Samantha and her attorney. Everything had to be timed perfectly. I went through the motions of getting ready, helping Madison with her dress, making sure Ethan looked perfect in his little suit. To anyone watching, I appeared to be the devoted daughter preparing for her parents' celebration, but inside, I was preparing for war. The Oak Ridge Country Club had been transformed into something magical. My weeks of planning had paid off. Wait. Roses and lily adorned every surface. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over elegant table settings, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. It was exactly the kind of sophisticated celebration my parents loved. Guests began arriving at 6 p.m. A carefully curated mix of family, business associates, and social connections that represented my parents' entire world. I recognized judges, city council members, prominent business owners, and several families whose names appeared on hospital wings and university buildings. My parents stood at the entrance like visiting royalty, receiving congratulations and admiration from their guests. Dad looked distinguished in his custom tuxedo, while Mom was radiant in a silver beaded gown that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Brooke, darling, Mom air-kissed my cheeks when I approached with the children. You look ... comfortable, and Madison, don't you look lovely in that dress? I knew the emerald color would bring out your eyes. Dad barely glanced at me before scooping up Ethan. There's my boy. Come on, I want to introduce you to some important people. You're sitting at the head table tonight, right next to Grandpa. The seating arrangement was the first public signal of what was coming. Ethan was placed between Dad and Nathan at the head table, while Madison and I were seated with distant relatives at a table near the back of the room as guests mingled during cocktail hour. I watched the dynamics Madison had been documenting for months. Nathan moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who belonged, accepting congratulations on his recent engagement to Kayla and discussing business opportunities with Dad's associates. Meanwhile, I played the role of the gracious divorced daughter, accepting condolences about my difficult transition and deflecting questions about my future plans with vague optimism. Madison stayed close to me, but I could see her eyes constantly scanning the room, taking mental notes of conversations and interactions. At one point, she squeezed my arm and nodded toward the entrance. Samantha had arrived. Samantha's entrance caused a ripple of confusion among the guests who remembered her, and curious glances from those who didn't recognize the elegant woman in a navy blue dress. She'd changed significantly in 15 years. Her hair was shorter and streaked with silver, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd built a successful life despite family rejection. Dad spotted her immediately, and I watched his face cycle through surprise, anger, and calculation. He whispered something to Mom, who went pale and began moving towards Samantha with the determined stride of someone preparing for battle. Samantha, Mom's voice carried across the room with forced brightness. What a ... surprise. I don't believe. You are SVPD. Hello, Dinah, Samantha replied calmly. I thought it was time to reconnect with family. 40 years of marriage is quite an achievement. The tension was palpable as other guests sensed drama brewing. Dad approached with his practiced political smile, but I could see the fury in his eyes. Samantha, how unexpected, he said, his voice controlled but cold. I'm afraid we didn't prepare seating for additional guests. That's fine, Richard, Samantha replied. I won't be staying long. I just wanted to witness this important family celebration. As dinner progressed, I found myself barely able to eat, watching the careful choreography of my parents' manipulation. Dad made sure Ethan was introduced to every important business associate as the future of Wallace Enterprises. Nathan was included in conversations about upcoming development projects and investment opportunities. The slideshow presentation began during dessert. 40 years of love and legacy, an elegant script. As family photos flashed across the large screen, I noticed the pattern Madison had pointed out, the visual narrative of our family that gradually erased Madison and me while incorporating Nathan more prominently. Then came Dad's toast. "Diana and I are overwhelmed by your presence here tonight," he began, raising his champagne glass. 40 years ago, I made the best business decision of my life." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd, but his next words sent chills down my spine. "Marriage is about building something lasting together, about making difficult decisions for the greater good of the family. Sometimes that means prioritizing the future over temporary discomforts." His eyes found mine across the room, and I saw something I'd never noticed before: complete dismissal. To him, I wasn't his daughter struggling through a difficult divorce. I was a problem to be managed. Today, we're not just celebrating the past, we're securing the future. To family legacy and wise investments. The applause that followed felt like thunder in my ears. Dad wasn't finished. As the applause died down, he remained standing, his champagne glass still raised. "Before we conclude this beautiful evening, Diana and I have an important announcement to share with our family and friends." He gestured for Nathan and Ethan to join him at the front of the room. Nathan stood immediately, his hand on Ethan's shoulder as they walked to the microphone. "Family continuity has always been our greatest concern," Dad continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "The Wallace name and legacy represent generations of hard work, careful planning, and wise stewardship." I felt Madison's hands slip into mine under the table, squeezing tightly. "Tonight, we're announcing steps to ensure that legacy continues through proper channels for generations to come. In the coming weeks, we'll be finalizing arrangements that will secure family assets and provide stability for our grandchildren's future." A murmur ran through the crowd as guests sensed something significant was happening. Sometimes the most loving choice is making difficult decisions for family members who may not understand what's best in the moment. But we're confident that time will prove the wisdom of these arrangements. That's when Madison stood up. The room fell silent, as every eye turned to my 16-year-old daughter, standing tall and composed in her emerald dress. "Grandpa," her voice carried clearly across the room, "are you talking about the arrangements to steal Mom's inheritance and have her declared mentally incompetent?" Gasps echoed through the room. Dad's face went white, then red. "Madison, sit down immediately," he commanded, but his authority had no effect on her. "Because I have months of recordings of you and Nathan planning exactly that," Madison continued, holding up her phone. "Should I play them now, or would you prefer to finish explaining to everyone how you forged great-grandmother's signature on a fake will?" The room erupted in shocked whispers. Phones came out as guests began recording the unfolding drama. "This is completely inappropriate," Mom hissed, moving toward Madison, but Samantha suddenly appeared beside my daughter. "Actually, Dinah, what's inappropriate is financial fraud," Samantha said calmly. "Madison, go ahead and play the recording." Madison connected her phone to the sound system. Apparently, she planned this technical detail in advance. Dad's voice filled the room with crystal clarity. "Brooke has always been too emotional, too independent. The divorce gives us the opportunity to restructure things properly. Nathan understands what's needed to maintain the Wallace name." Nathan's voice followed. "I appreciate your trust, Richard. With the house transferred to me and increased custody of Ethan, we can ensure proper maintenance of family assets. Brooke would just sell everything to fund some artistic pursuit." The final nail was Mom's voice. "We've always worried about Brooke's judgment. Thank goodness Nathan remained loyal despite the divorce. He's still the son we always wanted." The aftermath of Madison's revelation was swift and devastating. As the recordings played, I watched my parents' carefully constructed world collapse in real time. Nathan tried to leave immediately, but Samantha blocked his path. I don't think so, Nathan. There are some people here who want to speak with you. That's... When I saw them, two men in suits who'd been standing quietly near the back of the room. FBI agents, as it turned out, who'd been investigating Dad's business practices based on Samantha's complaint and Madison's evidence. Richard Wallace, one of the agents, announced, badge visible. You're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit financial elder abuse. The country club erupted in chaos. Guests were filming everything, posting to social media in real time. The hashtag Wallace scandal would be trending within hours dot as handcuffs clicked around Dad's wrists. He looked at me with pure hatred. This is what happens when you raise ungrateful children, he snarled. Madison stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. No, Grandpa. This is what happens when you underestimate the people you're trying to hurt. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Dad's financial manipulation. Not only had he been planning to steal my inheritance, but he'd been systematically looting family trusts for years, using the money to fund his lifestyle while keeping other family members financially dependent. 6 months later, our lives had transformed completely. With my rightful inheritance restored, all $2.3 million of it, plus several properties, I was able to purchase the art gallery and expand it into a thriving business. Madison received a full scholarship to Harvard, funded by her own trust fund that Dad had been hiding. Most importantly, we were free. Free from manipulation, free from conditional love, free from the exhausting effort of trying to earn approval. From people who saw us as problems to be managed rather than family to be cherished. The final irony? Dad's 40th anniversary party, meant to be the culmination of his manipulation, became the stage for his downfall. Sometimes justice has a sense of dramatic timing. As I finished telling this story, Madison is preparing for her freshman year at Harvard, and Ethan is thriving in our new home, no longer torn between competing loyalties. We've learned that family isn't about blood or names or money. It's about who shows up for you, who tells you the truth, and who fights for you when you can't fight for yourself. Sometimes the person who saves you is the one you least expect. In our case, it was a determined teenager who refused to let injustice stand, even when it meant standing up to the most powerful people in her world. And that's a lesson worth remembering. Never underestimate the power of someone who simply refuses to stay silent.